church. That was good enough to only do it once. Purple cows, Kevin Bacon, and Jesus. Yep, that's what we're talking about today. Purple cows, Kevin Bacon, and Jesus. Now, I'm guessing when you showed up this morning, you expected to hear about Jesus. The other two, maybe not so much. But it's Easter. The tomb is empty, so what you expected is kind of already out the window. Because when the two Marys got up early in the morning and headed out, they went to the sealed tomb. They didn't expect to find guards immobilized. They didn't expect to find the tomb unsealed, and they didn't expect to find the tomb empty. So what we expect on this Easter is already out the window at the very beginning. Easter is about the unexpected. So maybe purple cows and Kevin Bacon in Easter really isn't all that far-fetched. Okay, so maybe it is, but bear with me. How many of you have driven north on the turnpike? Okay, that's good. How many of you on that trip have seen cows? Awesome. So I also assume that you've pulled over the car, pulled out your cell phone, and took a picture of those cows. Nobody. I lost you. Well, I'm sure at least while you're driving along the road, you said, "Man, honey, those cows are beautiful," or whatever word you use to describe cows. Right? Perhaps your grandkids, forget it. But if you saw a purple cow on your trip north on the turnpike, I bet you would have seen it. And I bet you would have said something about that purple cow. And you might even have pulled out your cell phone and said, "I've got to get a picture of this purple cow." At least Pete's taking pictures. And if you've let your phone lay anywhere in the church with Pete around, you've gotten some of Pete's pictures. Short of an urban setting, cows grazing in a field along the road is not remarkable, right? It's not worthy of remarking about. They're just cows eating grass alongside the road. For Mary and Mary, the empty tomb was remarkable. The empty tomb was worthy of remark. Just like purple cows. Purple cows are worthy of sharing with someone, but not nearly as much as the empty tomb was for Mary and Mary. Purple cows, check. Because if you saw that, you'd remark. Now, Matthew's Easter story really has two focal points. The first is that the empty tomb is indeed remarkable. It is worthy of remarking about. It is worthy of sharing that good news. Now, the second part is that the two Marys are actually spreading this news. The rest of the disciples bailed. But the two women get up in the morning, go to the tomb, find it empty, and quickly leave. Not because they were scared, not because they didn't want to tell anybody, but because they wanted to tell people that the tomb was empty. These two women dashed back as fast as they could. Perhaps we're not quite as eager to share that story today, but those two women started a chain that led centuries, that we know the Easter story. Because of those two women, we know the Easter story. Which brings us to Kevin Bacon. I found one with a name tag in case you didn't recognize him. Perhaps you're familiar with 6 degrees of separation, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, which basically says you can take Kevin Bacon and any actor in Hollywood, and within 6 relationships, you can connect them to Kevin Bacon. Now, if you're sitting here today, you are within 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Thank you, Pastor Rebecca. If you take Joe Schmo in middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, and Mary Lou in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, within 6 degrees, I bet you can connect them with 6 degrees of separation. So if we were to share this remarkable news of Easter, that huge stones don't get in God's way, that armies and soldiers don't get in God's way, that even death does not get in God's way. If we were to share the news that none of those things determines God's action, not even fire. This picture was taken in Notre Dame Chapel when the firemen went in. In the midst of the destruction, the one thing remaining, glowing in the darkness, was the cross. If God's will is to move stone, if God's will is to move guards, if God's will is to cover the bleakness of the empty tomb, if the cross stands in the midst of a devastating fire, what else can God overcome? If God can overcome all, what else can God overcome? Or maybe the better question is, what can't God overcome in this world and in your lives? If God can cover that. Storms, guards, armies, stones, death, addiction, fire, mental illness, divorce, whatever it is, there's nothing that God can't overcome. Not only that, it's more remarkable than a purple cow. And if we, like the two Marys, hear this story and are willing to share the good news with others, everyone would hear that story. And if we're linked by just 6 degrees of separation, not only can we ensure that Kevin Bacon hears the story, but we can make sure that everyone on the planet knows the story of Christ risen from the tomb. Now, to be clear, to be abundantly clear, when I say hear, I don't really mean hear. When I say hear the good news, I don't really mean hear the good news, because for the most part, people know the story. Those original hearers, those original observers, did a great job of spreading the Easter story. However, far too few have experienced God's love, God's grace, God's mercy, and God's forgiveness. Oh, they may have heard it. They may have heard this thing exists, but for many people it's no more familiar, no more real than a unicorn. So when I say hear the good news, what I really mean is experience the good news. And if we're truly serious about the resurrected Christ, then we, like the two Marys, should quickly and excitedly leave, run out of here, and share that good news with everyone. We have to be more eager to share that love of Christ with everyone we meet. The one who rose from the tomb. More eager to share that than the picture of the purple cow we snap on the turnpike. And we must be more eager to show others what Christ's love and mercy and grace is about so that everyone experiences it, even Kevin Bacon. Because when Christ says from the cross that it is finished, when Christ says from the cross, it is finished, he didn't mean his life. He meant whatever afflicts you dies with him. Whatever weighs you down dies with him. And you are risen anew from the empty tomb, just like Christ. That's the beauty of the Easter message. It's a living and breathing message. And we get to be messengers of that living and breathing message. And we, hearers of the word, hearers of the good news, are tasked with sharing it. Hear these words. Christ is risen. Let's try that again. Christ is risen. And if Christ is risen, we are risen with him. Amen.